So the first of these kinds of foundational beliefs that he identifies is a belief in the senses, or in the accuracy or the reality of what his senses tell him is the case. So he says, surely whatever I had admitted until now is most true, I received either from the senses or through the senses. However, and by senses here he means like sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch. So the kind of five senses that we sometimes refer to. However, I have noticed that the senses are sometimes deceptive, and it's a mark of prudence never to place our complete trust in those who've deceived us even once. So what's he saying here? In the first sentence, he's saying that a whole lot of what he believed previously, he believes because it's based on things that he's seen or heard or touched. And if you think about it, that's probably true for a lot of our beliefs, right? I mean, think about it in your own case. How much of what you or I believe is based on what we have experienced through our senses? Probably a lot. Some philosophers would say everything we believe is based on our senses. Maybe that's not true. Maybe it is true, but I mean, certainly a whole lot is based on our senses. So there's some good reason to think that Descartes' claim here makes sense when he says that most of what he's believed to be true up to this point, he has received through the senses or from the senses. What does Descartes mean by the second sentence in this paragraph? Well, he has in mind things like optical illusions, mirages. I mean, for instance, you look at a glass of water and there's a stick in the water, say a fork or a spoon in the water, then the fork or spoon may look bent because when you look at the water, the way we explain it is refraction of light. But if you put a straight object into a glass of water and look at it from a certain angle, it will look bent even though it's really straight. So that's a case of the senses deceiving us. The spoon or stick looks bent, but it's really straight. And you've seen these kind of pages of optical illusions, kind of sometimes they're like funny or fun. Kids like to look at them and are surprised by them. That two lines will be the same length, but one looks longer than the other because of kinds of effects of our visual apparatus that we approximate certain things, or we infer or assume certain things, or that's the way that our eyes work, and so things look that way. So there are a lot of cases like this. Being out in the desert and looking off in the distance and thinking that one sees a building, but really it's just a mirage. That is, it's a kind of illusion created by the heat rising up off of the road or the earth in front of us. So because the senses have sometimes deceived us, then we could be deceived by the senses at any time, is Descartes' reasoning. And so therefore, there's at least one reason to doubt the senses, and we ought to put it into the suspended beliefs, shelf, and that would mean that everything based on the senses would be questionable and should be abandoned. But before Descartes actually goes that far as to suspend belief in everything based on his senses, he considers an objection. He writes, "But perhaps, even though the senses do sometimes deceive us when it is a matter of very small and distant things, still there are many other matters concerning which one simply cannot doubt, even though they are derived from the very same senses. For example, that I am sitting here next to the fire, wearing my winter dressing gown, that I am holding this sheet of paper in my hands, and the like." So you could think of the same thing in your own case. You're watching a video. Where are you? What room are you in when you're watching this video or when you're reading the text of Descartes' Meditations? Wouldn't it be crazy for you to really think that your senses are telling you you're in that room? And if you distrust your senses, that means that you would say, well, maybe I'm not really in this room. But that seems crazy, right? So that's what Descartes is saying here, is it would be crazy for me to doubt something as basic as that I'm sitting here in front of the fire looking at a piece of paper. So he says, but on what grounds could one deny that these hands and this entire body are mine, right? So he's saying, what about my own body? I mean, it appears to me, it seems to me through my senses that I have hands, that I have a body. How could one possibly deny that? Unless perhaps I were to liken myself to the insane, whose brains are impaired by such an unrelenting vapor of black bile, that they steadfastly insist that they're kings when they're utter paupers, or that they're arrayed in purple robes when they're naked, or that they have heads made of clay, or that they're gourds. But such people are mad, and I would appear no less mad were I to take their behavior as an example for myself. So he's saying literally it would be crazy for me to doubt that I'm sitting here in front of a fire looking at a piece of paper. I mean, that's the kind of thing that people in insane asylums believe, okay? But then Descartes presents a reply to his own objection. He says, this would be all well and good were I not a man who is accustomed to sleeping at night and to experiencing in my dreams the very same things, or now and then even less plausible ones, as these insane people do when they're awake. So in other words, sometimes I've dreamed that my head is a gourd or I'm made of glass, all these crazy things that he had just reported insane people believe. Our dreams can be pretty crazy, right? Our dreams can include all kinds of things. So since we have those experiences and in our dreams it seems that we're sensing them, right? It's the same kind of experience as when we sense things when we're awake. Then it seems like maybe it's not that crazy to think that maybe I'm not in front of the fire here. So he's going to go on to explain that a little more. He says, how often does my evening slumber persuade me of such ordinary things as these, that I am here, clothed in my dressing gown, seated next to the fireplace, when in fact I am lying undressed in bed. So his point there is, I do sometimes dream that I'm in a given room, maybe even looking at a white sheet of paper. It has happened before that I've dreamed things like what I think I'm experiencing right now. And how do I know that what I'm experiencing right now is not a dream, since I've had the same experiences before in dreams? And Descartes does a little kind of talking with himself in the meditation about this thought that he's having. He says, but right now my eyes are certainly wide awake when I gaze upon this sheet of paper. This head which I'm shaking is not heavy with sleep. I extend this hand consciously and deliberately, and I feel it. Such things would not be so distinct for someone who's asleep, as if I did not recall having been deceived on other occasions, even by similar thoughts in my dreams. So basically what he's done here is he said, but wait, is it really the case that there are no signs by which I can tell whether I'm asleep or dreaming? And then he says, well, it's sometimes happened in my dreams that I've looked for those signs and I've come to the conclusion that I'm not dreaming, that I'm awake, that it's real, but have actually been in a dream. So that suggests that no, there aren't any signs by which I can be confident, be absolutely certain that I'm not dreaming right now. And he draws that conclusion. He says, as I consider these matters more carefully, I see so plainly that there are no definitive signs by which to distinguish being awake from being asleep. Now, incidentally, this question of whether and how we could tell that we're awake now as opposed to dreaming, or when we're dreaming, how to tell whether or not we're dreaming or awake, was posed a long time ago in Chinese philosophy by a philosopher named Xuanzi, who is part of the Taoist tradition. And here is the famous quotation from his book called the Book of Xuanzi. Once upon a time, I, Xuanzi, dreamt that I was a butterfly, flitting around and enjoying myself. I had no idea I was Xuanzi. Then suddenly I awoke and was Xuanzi again. But I could not tell, had I been Xuanzi dreaming I was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming I was Xuanzi. And at this point, it's worth pausing for a moment to ask whether you agree with Descartes and Xuanzi's reasoning here. Is it true that there are no definitive signs by which to distinguish being awake from being asleep? Is it true that you can't tell for sure at any time whether you're dreaming or you're awake? Or do you think there is some way to tell for sure that you're dreaming or that you are awake? Well, Descartes thinks there is no way to tell, and on that basis, he says that all of what we believe on the basis of the senses is dubitable, since any of it could be something that we're just experiencing in a dream, then it all could be not what we think it is. It all could be incorrect. Everything we believe based on the senses is therefore questionable. And so he goes ahead and moves that that fundamental belief that he has, everything based on the senses, he just moves over to the suspended belief category. And that leaves him with a lot less of his edifice of knowledge or his edifice of belief, his sort of, again, house that represents all of his beliefs. It leaves him with a lot less than what he had before. He's now unable to believe a large number of things that he formerly believed using this method. So he's gone ahead and moved over senses and everything based on the senses to the suspended belief category, leaving his set of believed beliefs much emptier than it was before.